The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website.
I'll be talking with Lisa Neiman today to discuss the new National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number and why this change came to be.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Live and Learn. I'm your host, Jerry Renaud. Today we want to talk about OLLI, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of Nebraska. It's a great program with all kinds of things to offer. We have the director of OLLI with us today, Bob Mickle, who's going to talk about all things OLLI. You won't want to miss it. Don't go away.
Hello, I'm Barb Tyler, and I'm delighted to welcome Camus Holder today, the Community Prevention Administrator within Children and Family Services of the Division of Health and Human Services.
Hi everybody, I'm Kim Hachia. Hey, today on my segment on Live and Learn, we're going to be talking to Ann Tillery, who has an interesting story about surviving a stroke, and we're going to talk about the acronym FAST. So stay tuned and find out what FAST means.
This and more on today's Live and Learn.
Hello, I'm Barb Tyler, and I'm delighted today to welcome Lisa Neiman, the Clinical Administrator of Community-Based Services within the Behavioral Health Division of DHHS. Lisa, tell us a little history of the National Suicide Hotline and how the new streamline number has come about.
Yes, thank you. So in Nebraska, the Boys Town National Hotline Center has provided crisis intervention services in Nebraska since 1989, and since 2005, they've been the provider for the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It was the original National Suicide Prevention Lifeline Backup Center, and it transitioned to the number 988 this July 16th. So it will still have trained crisis counselors accredited by the American Society of Suicidology. In fact, in 2021, Boys Town handled 8,777 Lifeline local calls in Nebraska, which de-escalated 97.1% of Nebraska callers to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline without requiring the external emergency intervention. So they've done some great work for us. It's also provided crisis support to over 12,000 callers to the Nebraska Family Helpline. In fact, in the first 6 months of this year, the call volume has been up over 16% compared to the same time frame in 2021. A lot of that we relate to effects of the pandemic, stress with the economy, and a lot of different issues. But moving to the new 3-digit number for the Suicide Prevention Hotline is an opportunity to strengthen the existing lifeline. So in 2020, Congress designated the new 988 dialing code to operate through the current existing National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So if you dial that number, you will still be connected to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, but you can also dial 988 to reach the same place. The intention is to make this emergency number as simple and accessible as calling 911.
I think it's a great idea. I don't know why it took so long, to tell you the truth.
Right.
So suicide is prevalent throughout the society. For the average person, are there warning signs that people should be looking out for?
There are. So talking about suicide, our thoughts of suicide or actions are a sign of extreme distress, and all of it should be taken seriously. So these are an indicator that someone needs help. And talking about wanting to die by suicide is not a typical response to stress. All talk of wanting to die should be taken seriously and requires immediate attention. So the 988 will continue to help us move forward towards our goal of 0 suicides in Nebraska. Suicide is, as you were mentioning, is a very serious issue and is a national public health crisis in the United States, and it's the nation's 10th leading cause of death. So it's our hope that this new number, being simple and accessible and easy to remember, will help with the awareness of the accessibility to the number and help us save lives. Suicide rates among older adults are high, but there are protective factors for older adults too that we can support to reduce the risk of suicide. So these include things like strong community support, good health care, being connected to friends and family, and good coping skills.
So will Nebraska be unique? 988 covers the whole nation, but will Nebraska be unique in the way it handles these calls?
So Nebraska's been very proactive in how it's always handled these calls, and again, the Boys Town Lifeline's been really, really helpful and successful in that measure. And Nebraska has always been done well with access to resources. We ranked 4th in national surveys of behavioral health in 2021. So Nebraska's fortunate that we have a lower suicide rate than some of the surrounding states. But still, that doesn't mean that we want to let up on that. Our goal is 0 suicides in Nebraska, and we certainly want to drive towards that. But you mentioned, is Nebraska going to be unique in the way it handles calls? And so there is a unique aspect compared to someone who might dial 911, which sometimes traditionally happen to respond to a suicide risk. When you dial 911, you will talk with a person who answers the phone. Now, when you dial 988, the call center experience will be a little bit different. When you use this new technology, you'll hear some automated prompts before you're connected to someone that you can speak to. So the call center will also do some follow-up after someone calls 988 to make sure that everyone's safe and that they got connected to the services that they need. We also want to make sure that we can solve challenges and answer any questions that people might have to get some follow-up care that they might need. Nebraska has awesome statewide 24/7 mobile crisis response teams in each of our 6 behavioral health regions. So these teams serve both adults and youth, and certainly would serve as older adults as well. And if the individual would benefit from contact with a local team, the 988 crisis counselor will connect them to a local mobile crisis response team in their area, who can come to the individual if necessary and if requested, to help connect them to services, do some further assessment and screening, and make sure that that they're safe and taken care of. So the mobile crisis teams have clinicians and non-clinicians, and they can partner with law enforcement also if necessary to make sure that they can go to a person's home. Another option is that they can use telehealth if they prefer.
Good idea. Yeah.
So that's often a really convenient way for people to access help without having to leave their home. So as I mentioned earlier, moving to 988 doesn't mean that the 11-digit number goes away, so I just want to emphasize that that number is still available to people too. And in Nebraska, we will still maintain the 24/7 crisis hotlines that operate in some regions throughout Nebraska, so that those numbers are always available. The more resources we have to offer help to someone, the better.
So you mentioned behavioral health have six different regions within Nebraska. Do you envision any other things going on, the behavioral health needs in Nebraska in the coming years besides suicide?
Yeah, so as this rolls out and we get more attention and hopefully a lot of success with it, we want to make sure that the rest of our crisis care continuum is strong as well. So in Nebraska, we're really working with our system partners to make sure that we have everything in place to offer services throughout an emergency or a crisis situation, whether that's mental health or a substance use issue. So the system that we envision in Nebraska means that Nebraskans will have someone to call, which is the 988 number, someone to respond, which could be the mobile crisis teams I was talking about a few minutes ago, and then somewhere to go, which would be referred to the crisis continuum of services, which may include a hospital or a crisis stabilization center or some local counselors or other services to that individual. So that's what we're looking for, to really make sure that we have available to all Nebraskans of all ages to meet their needs.
So the 6 areas, and I imagine it does go out into western Nebraska, it's not all located here on the eastern side.
That's right. It covers all areas in Nebraska.
Good. So when a call comes in, you kind of touched on this earlier, when a call does come in, is anything specifically done for, if you can tell, as a younger adult as opposed to a senior adult? Is there anything, is it routed differently? Is it handled differently?
It's not, but I will take that to mention that if you're a veteran, you can have the option to push one of the phone numbers to be connected to the veteran suicide, to speak specifically to someone regarding veterans issues.
Okay.
So that is a different issue. But in terms of for older adults or younger adults, there's not anything different that can that will be done throughout that phone call. The crisis counselors who are answering these lines work with both adults and youth who are experiencing a crisis. And Boys Town has over 1,600 resources across the state of Nebraska to make sure that people can be served in a service that makes sense for them and their family. But we do want to encourage seniors to call 988 to reach out to somebody if they need to make sure that they can talk to someone for assistance with any suicidal thoughts, because it is something that we do want to take serious. And we really want to emphasize that there is hope and help for this. Research shows that people that call a suicide prevention number such as 988 often after the call feel more hopeful, less depressed, and are better able to know what next steps are for them to be able to resolve some of those feelings. So those are really issues that we want to emphasize, that help as possible, and want people to reach out because it is a very successful number to call. And there's resources specific to address issues that seniors specifically may face if they call that number, and ways that we can help so that we can prevent deaths by suicide.
Okay. So if somebody wanted more information about suicide or other services that are available to Nebraskans, I know they were putting some graphics up with some numbers, but what would be the thing in some small town Nebraska after calling this, or if it's not suicide, if it's something else with dealing with the behavioral health problem? You know, resources can be hard to find out in western Nebraska. Would a hospital or their healthcare provider be the best place to go besides these graphics that are going by?
So that's always a good place to start. Again, the main thing is just to reach out because we know that help is available. And there is resources throughout the state. You're right, it might not be as plentiful as it is in some parts of the eastern part of the state, but there's crisis continuum services throughout the entire state. So anybody that's experiencing a behavioral health or substance use crisis or having thoughts of suicide can be connected to local resources where they can receive some assistance. These phone numbers that are on the screen too are really important because those are other ways to connect to somebody who you can talk to help resolve some stresses and issues that people might be facing.
And people probably don't think that like a domestic violence helpline would be something behavioral health, but it is, because it does affect at least one of the two causing the problems. Or the rural response. I think that is a really important helpline as well, because that's, I would imagine, specifically made for those in the rural areas.
It is, and Nebraska has used the Rural Response Hotline for several years and had very good success with it too, and we really encourage people to use that number for any issue that they're facing, if they need resources or they're having behavioral health issues.
And then I know there was a disaster helpline, I'll just call it that. Would that be for those like maybe were affected by the fires earlier this summer back in western Nebraska? That would be something that's the kind of it's meant to be, that kind of helpline?
Yeah, so if you call a disaster helpline that we have here in Nebraska, people that are affected by the fires and the floods that we had, that type of thing, can receive more disaster-specific information, but they can also be connected to more behavioral health resources if they need it. So it certainly is a good place to start. Like we said, we want to encourage everyone to call a number that makes sense to them and they can be connected.
Well, definitely they just need to reach out and, you know, somebody's there. And I would imagine if they get a wrong number, they could be routed to the right resource.
Absolutely,
Okay.
and again, that's the goal. We want to have some place to call, someone to respond, and somewhere to go.
So anything else you can think of to talk about with this segment at all, or as we wrap up?
Well, I think, again, I would just want to mention that we know that help is available and that there's hope for having these feelings, and we would just want to encourage people to call 988. You can also call it for a family member or a friend if you need to, so we would encourage that.
Okay. Lisa, thank you for coming in today to talk about this new Streamline number. I think it's a wonderful thing that Nebraska is participating in as well as other states. And to the audience here, I'd like to thank them for tuning in today. And remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
So, I'm playing with the dog, and I get this robocall from the Social Security Administration saying my card had been suspended and I had to call them back immediately. And that's when I remembered a tip from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Random robocall? This is a Social Security scam.
Recognize fraud sooner,
Robots.
so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live and Learn. I'm your host, Jerry Renaud. We have a wonderful program today. We're going to talk about all things OLLI, that is the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. I want to make sure I get that right. And we have the OLLI director with us, Bob Mickle, who is going to be here and talk to us about a lot of fun things going on with OLLI, some of the upcoming classes, and should be fun. Thanks for joining us today, Bob.
Well, thanks for the invitation, Jerry. Appreciate it. It's always nice to come visit with you.
You know, there's lots of really great classes, and some of the titles are just, I can't wait to talk to you about these, but we have a bunch of other things that we also want to talk about before we talk about the classes. And I think, first of all, we have to talk about the pandemic. That's been something that has really had a lot of impact for OLLI for the last several years. Where are you in that regard? I know for a while you offered lots of Zoom classes, and then we're sort of going back and forth into the in-class and the Zoom combination. Where are we headed for this winter?
Well, yeah, you're right. COVID created a new normal, and so I don't think we're really back to where we were. We are now at a new normal. We've done some looking, and over the last year, we found that about 50% of all of our enrollments were people who were registered to take courses versus Zoom or via Zoom. The nice thing about it is we have that 50% now that is coming back and are taking classes in person. One of the things that has been our emphasis over the last year or so has been the implementation of more what we would call multi-format classes. Some people call them hybrid classes. It's just a terminology thing. But that has allowed us to give people choices, and it's been a benefit not for only our people here in Lincoln, but from our membership from all across the state and all across the country, who we have lots of members for.
Right. Now, let's keep our fingers crossed and assume that the pandemic is really going to go away. Will you keep the Zoom classes? Has that been something that you've sort of found as a positive?
Absolutely, absolutely. Even our local people say that they appreciate it, and quite honestly, as we move into our winter term, a lot of people say they'll probably register more that way because they don't want to have to drive in this kind of weather. So
sure. Cool. Let's talk about the membership. There's several sort of interesting things that are happening with that. One of those is you're offering a great deal for people who haven't really been involved in OLLI before, but the membership is really a good deal.
yes, when we go to the mid-year, we do drop our membership down to $50. And that allows anybody who joins at this time of the year to get the full benefits of our terms 3, 4, and 5, which are our winter, spring, and summer terms.
That's really really great. And the membership, you're really working on that membership. I know your goal is to try to get it to pre-pandemic levels, right?
Yes, absolutely. Before the pandemic hit, we were north of 1,700 members, but most of those members were in Lincoln and Lancaster County. We dropped significantly, as did all OLLIs across the country, but we do believe that by the end of this academic year, our membership will be well over 14 and probably even closer to 1,500 members. Again, because with the ability to reach people all across the country, we're really having an impact in Omaha, the I-80 corridor, and obviously outstate.
And with that, more people coming back, I know one of the things that has been an issue, we talked about it last time, was this new computer system that you've created. It has made life so much easier for people to register, has it not?
Absolutely. About a year ago, we went to Campus CE, which is a new program for us to operate internally, but it also has a wonderful registration program that functions very much like online shopping. You know, consider it something like Amazon. You go, you search through the courses that you want, you add to the cart, and then you check out and pay, and then within minutes you receive a receipt and all the information about where the class will be held, how to access the class, any other information you want. So it saved our staff a lot of time, and it's certainly made a lot less grief for those who have joined and register that way.
Yeah, and there used to be lots of mail-in registrations, and you say that seems to be going away.
We've had a significant drop, and COVID was part of that player too, because people were forced to learn how to deal with some technology. We probably register now less than 10% of our people via mail.
Okay, wonderful. OLLI does lots of really fun, interesting things that we want to talk about. One of those, and you and I have talked about this, is that you are starting to reintegrate the social aspect of OLLI. So you have several things that are sort of going on we might talk about that are sort of getting people back together.
Absolutely. You know, we do value the social aspect of OLLI, and that is one of the components that Bernard Osher wanted when he started this entire organization. So one of the things that I'm most proud of that we've been able to bring back is something called Breakfast with the UNL Coaches. And we've had some great experiences within the last year. Amy Williams came to speak to our group from women's basketball. Julia Bond, women's bowling. We just had Aaron Butsky, who is the cheer and mascot sponsor. And then coming up in the next couple of terms, we've got somebody from volleyball coming, and then somebody from academic support. So we're kind of catching all ranges of that. But in addition to the UNL breakfast coaches, we've started doing pop-up events. We had our membership committee basically created an invitation for people to come join for a social out at one of the local craft breweries here in town, and we actually had to shut off registration because we got more people wanting to come than the place could hold.
Oh,
so,
great.
So things like that. We just had a great winter dinner at Screamers the other day, which was fantastic. We took a trip to Lawrence Gardens in Omaha for the holiday lights. And one thing that's coming up later this year, it's term 4, but we're actually putting together a trivia night. We want people to come together, have some fun. We'll probably have some dinner with it, and then we'll see how smart some people are.
Oh, good, good. Do we think we'll get the football coach to come in sometime? You have a call into him yet?
Well, we have to figure out who his staff is, and then we'll work from there.
Okay, very good. Another thing before we get into the classes, the trips. You've had some wonderful trips. Do you have some things planned for this next year?
Yes, we do. We just entered an agreement probably 6-7 months ago with a new travel vendor, and Star Destinations out of Carroll, Iowa has been great in putting together trips. So if you wanted to go to Egypt and the Nile, sorry, that trip is already full. If you wanted to go to Italy, sorry, that trip has already filled out. We've been promoting them, and people are jumping all over them. But we do have some others that are coming up. In the spring, it's always kind of neat to go to the Pella Tulip Festival.
Oh, yes.
And see the bridges of Madison County. We also have a mid-June trip planned for the Colorado Mountain Views, where you get to ride some trains and up into the mountains and see some amazing things there. We do have one more international trip planned. It's to the Emerald Islands, and that'll happen next August. There is still room on that trip. And then the other one that we've got going on is a trip up to Wisconsin coming up this fall to it's called the Serene Shores of Door County. And so we're trying, again, it's another way of getting people out and about, and we're very excited, and we hope that people will join us for that.
Oh, they sound like fun. Wonderful. All right, let's talk about the classes. I know there's lots of sort of basic classes that get offered on a regular basis, and those are probably, again, coming back this year, learning to play the ukulele and some bridge classes and some things like that. But you do have some really interesting titles that are coming up, and I believe this is airing in January, so the catalog will be out. People can either go online or if they get a copy of it at home. Yep. But there are some interesting ones, and we just picked out a few. One of them is called Wanted, 10,000 Women to Go West. Tell us a little bit about this class.
Well, I think the first thing you need to know about that class is the instructor is Lynn Roper. And Lynn Roper has a passion for studying women's history, and so she's put courses together for us on something called the Fly Girls. She's also done something on women code breakers, during the war, and this is her next go-round in that regard. Starting back in the 1880s, Fred Harvey dining rooms were popping up all across the way out west, and we always hear about the orphan trains and their movement out west. Well, what the Harvey girls were basically designed to do, they were recruited to move out west, leave their homes, take a job as a waitress, serving people venturing out west, and it got to be quite a fascinating story, if you will. And Lynn will be telling that story.
Oh, it just sounds fascinating, and I love the title. Okay, another one. It's called Free Speech Under Attack in Nebraska. This one sounds really interesting, and I'm guessing it will create some fascinating discussions. Tell us a little bit about maybe how this class came about.
Well, a couple of our instructors for this class are journalism emeriti at the university.
Okay.
And I think this all came about when earlier in the year we learned that the Grand Island Northwest school newspaper had been discontinued because there was some disagreement on what could and should be published, and the version of free speech kept coming up. And so we're going to look at that particular incident. There's going to be discussion about banning books and all those types of things where free speech affects us right here in the state.
Great. Sounds just fascinating, and I bet you I know who some of the instructors are. There's always a lot of interest in history, lots of World War II classes. I've taken several of them myself, but this one really caught my eye. It's called World War II, How the Imperfect Good Defeated the Near Perfect Evil. Fascinating title. What can you tell us about this class?
Fascinating title, fascinating instructor. Thomas Berg has been a staple for Ollie for years, and while Tom is now living up in the Minneapolis area, he is presenting this class via Zoom. We also open up a classroom in our building because we have a lot of people who will just come to congregate together and watch and then have conversations among themselves. But 20 years after the war to end all wars ended, we had a more cruel, more hideous war, and this obviously was the war of the Alliance versus Hitler and his German Empire. So we'll study the good and the bad of that war, and Thomas will make it very entertaining for everybody.
Oh, I'm sure he will. He's a wonderful instructor. I've taken some classes with him. He's fabulous. Another great topic, and certainly one that has been in the news lately, is weather. The class will take a look at some of the weather extremes that we've been experiencing lately, and we're recording this in December, and there is a huge storm that's rolling across, and tornadoes and all kinds of things. What's going to be involved in this class?
Well, this class will talk a little bit about statistics, it'll talk a little bit about safety, and then there'll be a bunch of stories shared about some of the historic weather and storms across the state of Nebraska. The interesting part about this is our instructor is Brad Anderson.
Oh, okay,
who
good.
is our the KOLN KGIN TV meteorologist. Brad taught a course for us a while back and was completely taken in by Ollie, and so he's regularly now starting to schedule classes because I think he enjoys it just as much as those people who attend his classes.
Oh, that's great, and you know, it's a really interested group of people who want to come and take these classes, and they love the discussion. I think they love that part of it as much as even getting some of the information.
Yep.
We're going to run out of time. I knew we couldn't quite get to everything, but if somebody has a question or a concern, let's at least tell them where they can go, or a phone number to call, or an email that they might be able to get some information from.
Absolutely. We are very easy to get a hold of. You can go to our website. That's really the best place to get as much information with as little problem as possible. It's just ollie.unl.edu.
Okay.
If you have specific questions about something you see or something you don't see, contact us at our email address is ollie@unl.edu, or you can always call us at 472-6265.
Wonderful. It's a great program. Thanks so much for taking some time to come down and talk to us about it today. We appreciate it.
Jerry, it's always a pleasure.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in. I'm your host, Jerry Renaud. Stay safe, stay healthy, and remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
I was doing some shopping and got a pop-up on my laptop. Computer had a virus. So I called the number on the page, and the guy on the phone wants to take control of my screen to sort it out. Then I remember a tip I got from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Control my screen. This is a tech support scam. Thankfully, my order still went through.
Recognize fraud sooner so your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Hi everybody, welcome to Live and Learn. My name's Kim Hachia. I really want to thank the folks at LNK TV and Aging Partners for producing the show. We're back in the studio, which is always fun. And my guest today is Ann Tillery. Ann has become a celebrity, sort of, but maybe not for the reasons that she would have originally wanted. Ann, in May 2021, suffered a stroke while she was on an electronic phone call, a Zoom meeting. And although no one else on the meeting noticed it, she noticed it. And because there are symptoms that she was having that are kind of common if you're having a stroke. And so since then, she has told her story numerous times, even on national television. And the story itself is really compelling. But what we're going to talk about today, beyond the story, is the symptoms that you can recognize, what you need to do, and how to get help. And that's the most important part of the story. So welcome, Anne. I'm excited that we're going to talk about this.
I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks. So briefly tell your story. I just synopsized it, but tell us again.
Sure. I was alone in a room at work, and I was speaking during a Zoom call when suddenly, just like that, my speech started to slur. I could see in my screen that my left side of my face was drooping and my left arm went heavy. I logged out, I stood up and fell to the floor immediately as my left side was already paralyzed. And this was all within 5 minutes of noticing the first signs of stroke. Luckily, when I stood up, I had grabbed my phone and I had it in my hand when I was laying on the floor, and I was able to call 911. I made it to the ER at Bryan West within 25 minutes of noticing the first signs of stroke.
Right. And so you're kind of an example of what I guess the Stroke Association, is that the organization? The Heart
Or the American Heart Association.
Right, and Stroke Awareness, they have that acronym FAST.
Right.
So you had all of that. So what does FAST stand for?
So FAST is an acronym coined to stand for F for facial droop, A, arm weakness, S, slurred speech, and T is time to call 911. And you don't have to have all those symptoms. I had a classic, all of them. But if you notice any of those symptoms, it's time to call 911 and get to the ER.
Right. And I know a lot of people maybe are a little bit nervous about that because they don't want to cause a scene or, but I mean, partly for you, we were still deep in the pandemic and you were at an office that was practically empty. So the chances that somebody would have found you were kind of minimal, right?
Absolutely. When I was on the floor, my door was closed and I thought I was calling out for help. It was probably just a whisper because I was no longer able to swallow. And luckily I did have my cell phone in my hand. But the important part of my message is time equals brain tissue.
Right.
So the faster you can get medical help, the better chance you have at surviving and then working toward as much regaining your prior level of function as possible.
Right, right. So you told me you had what's called a hemorrhagic stroke, which is a brain bleed, which are caused by high blood pressure. So tell me about that.
I was shocked. Hemorrhagic stroke is predominantly caused by high blood pressure. I just had my 6-week check, or my annual wellness check 6 weeks prior to my stroke. And I had not been treated for high blood pressure. Brushed it off to white coat syndrome, which is when you go into a doctor's office and your blood pressure naturally spikes because white coats, doctors are around. But I actually did have high blood pressure. So one of the main points that I can't emphasize enough, it's so important to monitor your blood pressure routinely at home and not defer to the annual visit. And this is my blood pressure cuff that I use regularly at home. And it's about a $50 piece of equipment. You can go down to your local CVS or any local pharmacy and pick one up, and I highly recommend everyone have one in their home.
Right. We have one at home. Ours is very similar to that. It's really easy to use, and I think they're actually coming up with some, and I don't know how reliable they are, but like apps for your phone or your phone watch that can maybe monitor that. Again, not sure how accurate your blood pressure is on that, but it will monitor things like your heart rate or other things. So we're becoming tech-centric, but I think that's really important to be able to do that. So you're in the hospital for how many days?
So I'm in the ICU for 2 days, and then I transitioned to acute inpatient rehab and spent the next 13 days learning how to sit, stand, bathe, dress myself. I had no function in my left side when I went in, and even a week later I had very little function in my left arm. And so when I was strong enough, I was walking to about 10 days later, transitioned to outpatient OT-PT and speech for another 6 months.
Right. You and I talked about how you're obviously a healthy person. and you had sort of a healthy lifestyle before, and do you think that helped you survive? I mean, obviously what helped you survive was you were able to call 911, but tell me about that.
I've been told my quick action to call 911, coupled with my active lifestyle prior to stroke, was the difference between life and death and recovery versus disability. You know, when I look back, that my stroke occurred on May 18th, 2021, and I look at 2020 and 2021, and the American Heart Association has what they call Life's Essential 8, these key factors for measuring your own cardiovascular health. And, you know, it's nutrition, exercise, not smoking, healthy sleeping, managing your weight, cholesterol, blood sugar, and blood pressure. And when I look back at that and reflect, 4 of those I failed at. I know my sleep was off. The quality and length of my sleep was off. I was not eating my normal diet. My exercise routine was off. And I never worried about my blood pressure, but I should have.
Right, right. But you, because you had that healthy lifestyle, you told me that you were really interested in yoga, and that sort of your muscle memory kicked in. It kind of helped you sort of, you had a lot of strength, innate strength, because you've been doing yoga and working out and everything, but that your muscle memory kicked in and helped you do things like sit on the balance ball and on the, you know, the little rocky beam thing. And
it's so critical to have that follow-up therapy once you have a stroke. I learned the first 3 to 6 months post-stroke, it's the most critical time to be rebuilding your brain pathways. And for me, when I was still inpatient, I was up on the balance ball, and it's like I wanted to get back up on my feet, and I believe my 12 years of practicing yoga expedited my ability to balance and walk, and then also set incremental goals. You know, when my occupational therapist, the first thing she said when I was still, when I was just delivered, she goes, "What's on your calendar?" And I said, "Well, the Cattleman's Ball in my hometown of Columbus in 2 weeks." And she said, "Okay." And it felt silly just even saying that out loud when I couldn't even walk.
Right.
And you know what? They made an aggressive plan and threw it at me, and they got me to the Cattleman's Ball. And that was at 2 weeks. At 3 months, I had a planned trip with my lifetime girlfriends to meet up in Estes Park, made that happen. And at 4 months, had the goal of taking a family trip to Disney World. And again, made that happen and logged in over 100,000 steps that week. And so it's so important post-stroke to just keep pushing goals.
Right.
Last month was 15 months post-stroke, and I was out to Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs, and I'm now back to my left arm side planks, which require a lot of upper body strength.
And balance.
And balance.
And sort of intentionality, because you have to want to do it. So, yeah, that's amazing. So, are you still doing physical therapy and occupational therapy and all that, or does that continue forever, or how does that work?
My wellness goals will continue. Just last month, I enrolled in yoga teacher training, and so I'm continuing my yoga practice in deeper meditation and stretching and knowledge, and it is a lifetime commitment to wellness.
Right. So you have become kind of, I know this phone call that you were on was actually part of your advocacy for the Alzheimer's Association, but you've also become somewhat of an advocate now for the Heart Association. So talk about that a little bit and how you're, you know, telling your story and how you hope that helps other people.
Well, you know, especially as women, we're always deferring to helping other people's needs, and we need to really regain our own rhythm and take control of our own life's wellness factors, and such as, you know, and monitoring and doing self-checks, and really about, you know, how are we feeling and making adjustments. And what I've learned well, there's a couple of things that I've learned. First of all, if you're alone, have your phone on you. You know, make sure that you're that you have that phone right with you if you need to call 911. And again, you know, the other thing that I've learned is, you know, replace the word someday from your vocabulary. If something is important to you, you know, tomorrow is not promised.
Right.
So make it happen.
Right. I know that very recently there was a situation in, I think, Texas or Oklahoma where an anchor woman realized she was having your same symptoms while she was live on air, and she kind of threw it to other people,
Right.
and they stood up. They knew what was going on, and they called, and she's okay, but she's, I think, significantly younger than you and I are. So obviously a stroke can happen to anybody at any age, and so, you know, being aware of those, the FAST thing, which once again, let's say that, facial drooping,
Arm weakness, slurred speech, time to call 911.
Yeah, time to call 911. That's just, your story is just really remarkable, and I want to say, yeah, I'm going to say it. There was a little bit of luck there, but I think there was also a little bit of you knew what to do. And I think telling this story really, maybe other people will remember that FAST is really important, and it's a cool acronym because it's also, you know, talks about time and how time is such an important thing. Absolutely. Anything else you want to tell me?
Live and learn.
That's a perfect segue. That's a perfect segue. Thanks, Anne, for being my guest today. I really appreciate it. And I just want to remind our viewers that it's never too late to live and learn about your own health.
My kid has been asking for this hot new gaming thing, and I was like, okay, he had a birthday coming up anyway. So I finally find the video game online, in stock. Thing is, it was from this shoddy website full of typos. That's when I remembered a tip I got from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. Bogus website? This is a shopping scam. Got us matching t-shirts instead.
Recognize fraud sooner. He loves his. So your money lives longer. The younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Good morning. I'll be talking with Camus Holder today to discuss the Kinship Navigator program, which works to keep children within family members in that net, creating a multi-generational family instead of utilizing foster care. Camus, please tell us exactly what the Kinship program is and when did it begin?
Yeah, good morning. I'm glad to be talking about our Kinship Navigator program today. The Kinship Navigator program began within Nebraska. In 2020 is when we started the process. We effectuated contracts and started providing service delivery to families in 2021. Kinship Navigator programs have been in existence around the country for many years, really to recognize and support kin and relatives who are raising children. And so in Nebraska, the Department of Health and Human Services issued an RFP in order to seek providers to provide this service in Nebraska. And we started delivering that service through our two providers, which is Nebraska Children's Home Society and Lutheran Family Services. They serve multiple counties across Nebraska. And so they've started delivering this service to families in 2021, so we're about a year into providing the Kinship Navigator services.
So this service is for families who are not involved in the welfare system then?
Correct. So really the intention of this Kinship Navigator program was to try to prevent kids from having to come into the child welfare system. There's many children who are living with relatives or kin, and kin is really just defined as somebody the family or the child knows. And so when kids have to come into the child welfare system, that really creates a trauma, creates added barriers and levels for families, both their parents and the relatives and kin who are raising them. And so the Kinship Navigator service was intended to try and provide supports and services and case navigation for families who are raising children in order to prevent out-of-home care or even formalized foster care services.
And the Kinship program can help with different services to provide guidance and so forth?
Absolutely. So the Kinship Navigator program really can provide, it's kind of a wraparound service, an individualized family service, anything that relative or kin family might need, anything that the children might need, really intended to look in that community and connect families to community services, to Department of Health and Human Services, economic assistance benefits, child care services. Kinship Navigator also provides just kind of emotional support and help training. It's a hard job to raise children, especially when you're raising your grandchildren or a different relative or a kin. There's some different dynamics that come along with that.
So this program is within the Children and Family Services within the DHHS.
Correct.
So that is a good support right there. So how did it come to be? Was it because of the need for more kids in foster care?
So there's, across the country and really for many, many years, multi-generational families and extended families raising children has really been around for many, many years. It's kind of a normalized, natural thing that happens. Unfortunately, there's times when parents are not able to provide that care for their children. Some parents are in some kind of treatment. There might have been a tragedy and a parent is now deceased. Mental health care, incarceration, or just some different socioeconomic barriers that are preventing that family from providing for and supporting their children in their own home. And so they've just done a natural thing that a lot of families do outside of the child welfare system, which is to have a grandparent, a relative, a friend, somebody that they feel a trusted individual that can provide care for their children. So there is an obvious intended benefit of not having to have families enter the child welfare system and to provide those supports outside of the child welfare system in order to just normalize that structure and continue that multi-generational extended family support. I think all of us who have children know that it takes lots of support and lots of people wrapped around you to raise children. And this is really just kind of a formalization of that and providing that support, knowing that raising a relative, a grandchild, or a kinship child can create some barriers and some struggles.
I would imagine, I've not been through foster care, but I imagine anytime you can stay with a relative or somebody that you know, there's a lot less trauma and having to uproot and move to a different location, basically. You provided me with some great stats about the number of children living with relatives as opposed to in the child. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. So some of the numbers that we've been able to gather is that there's been around 10 to 15,000 children living in some other kind of family structure with a grandparent, with a relative, with a kinship parent. We also know that that's something that is focused on if a child does have to enter the child welfare system. So if there is a child welfare placement, approximately 60% of those children are also in a relative or kinship placement. So if you think about that, that's 10 to 15,000 children across our state that might be living with a relative or kin. That's a really big number that I don't know that people recognize that it's out there. And I think just that in and of itself, for me at least, kind of takes some of that stigma out of that. That's really kind of a normalized situation that would happen in your or my families if I was unavailable to care for my child too. And you had mentioned just kind of that additional trauma that comes if a child has to be in a different situation. And being able to stay with a grandparent, a relative, a kin, you're eating, the same kind of foods that you maybe were eating. Point. You might be able to stay in your same school, your same community, your same holiday traditions, things that just kind of normalize that and remove some of that trauma and stigma for that child.
So in the kinship program, there's that support, grandparents and so forth. There's different kinds of support systems within that. I think you said that they work outside the family welfare system. So can you speak on that a little bit?
So the Kinship Navigator program provides, they can provide education, support, and training. So as I mentioned before, if you haven't raised children for, say 20 years, and then you all of a sudden have a 3 and a 6-year-old in your home, that, things have changed, parenting changes over the years. So the Kinship Navigator program provides just general emotional support, which can be a big help, as well as training, concrete supports like helping with clothing, helping get referrals for childcare. Often people who haven't been parenting for any period of time, childcare is expensive. Those costs have continued to rise. So that's a
monetary support?
Yep, there can be some monetary support. One of probably the biggest benefits is the connection to our other Department of Health and Human Services economic assistance benefits. So helping match the relative or kin up with any of those other benefits that they might qualify for under relative payee or relative ADC to help financially support the family. So it's kind of a multifaceted concrete financial supports, emotional support, and then just case navigation to help connect to different resources within the community.
So I imagine then that there's a case agent then that would pop in and visit with them to see how things are going and offer guidance as needed.
Yes, there is. So the two providers that provide this service, Nebraska Children's Home and Lutheran Family Services, both have kinship navigators that make home visits with the family. They can attend meetings with the family. They can help make phone calls. So they are kind of just that connection and that support person for the family. So kind of a case manager, if you will. But it's a voluntary program. Families are never obviously required to participate in the Kinship Navigator program. So it's really just a way to build an additional support for that kin or relative family.
So I kind of touched on being grandparents in this kind of a program besides aunts and uncles and other relatives. Can you estimate the number of multi-generational families that have been supported because of this program? You said 15,000 kids, but how many does that break down for family-wise? I assume there's multiple kids
within those families. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned, it's a fairly newer program. We just started providing the service delivery in 2021. So over the last 12 months or so, we've been able to support around 100 families that are raising relative or kinship children, and we really hope to expand that. That's one of the reasons why we're excited about this segment today, to kind of get the word out about this program that's out there, really looking to expand that and making sure that grandparents and relatives, other relatives or kin who are raising children know that this program exists. There's kind of a specific focus on grandparents raising grandchildren, so there's some additional supports and even classes and things like that that grandparents could participate in.
So in order to take advantage of this program, are there certain guidelines that the kin has to meet? Like, do they have to have separate bedrooms? Do they have to have transportation? Is there anything that's required of them to do this?
There's really not. Obviously, when the kinship navigators are working with the family, they're looking for ways to support the household, looking for any, safety concerns. Again, if you haven't raised children for a while, there's things like smoke alarms and child-proofing and nutrition things, education things that they might be providing support and guidance for. But there's really not an eligibility criteria. You just have to be raising and parenting a relative or kin child.
So to take advantage of this, do they apply online? Do they go to a physical site? How does a family go about checking into this to avoid the actual foster care system?
Sure. So if you're raising a grandchild, a relative, or a kin, you can definitely reach out either to Health and Human Services or directly to Nebraska Children's Home Society or Lutheran Family Services. I think at the end of this segment, we'll post some information about how you directly access them through their contact information. I'll give a couple numbers if that's okay. To reach Nebraska Children's Home Society, you would call 1-888-315-7347. Or to reach Lutheran Family Services for this Kinship Navigator program, you would call 1-833-572-2053. You can also Google search just Kinship Navigator Nebraska, and that will pull up both of those websites as well as our Nebraska DHHS website.
So the last one you gave, the Lutheran Family Services, that is one mainly for Lancaster County. The rest is statewide as a general rule.
Right. So when we implemented these programs, we kind of piloted in specific counties while we work to expand. And Lutheran Family Services exclusively serves, well, not exclusively, one of the counties that they serve is Lancaster County.
So is this kinship program, is this nationwide? I mean, I had never heard of it until I started doing some research and contacted you. Is this a nationwide program? Is Nebraska slow to the court, or is this something we're kind of pioneering?
I would say that Nebraska is on the front end of that. There's many Kinship Navigator programs across the country, but Nebraska was one of the first to implement it in our prevention services plan. This program being specifically for pre-system involved families, pre-child welfare involved families, is also unique. All states, including Nebraska, have different ways that they support kin and relatives once a child is entered into the foster care system. This is really kind of going upstream, and that is an innovative strategy for Nebraska.
And so kind of on the flip side, then, if it's fulfilled its purpose, the kids are doing well, mom and dad come back from wherever, can they revert back to a home situation, or is there a testing, a trial period that the parents can go back?
So in these situations, because there's no real formal system involved, it's really a decision amongst the family. So if a parent was in some kind of treatment unable to care for their child for some other way, it's really kind of a decision amongst the family. The
Not
kinship navigator could have a role in that and kind of think about some guidance and some things to think about. But because the children are not in formal foster care, there's not like a system approval.
Not a court system
Yeah,
then.
there's no court system involved, and grandparents could decide, you know, okay, mom and dad are ready to, you know, parent the children again in whatever structure that looks like. Or some grandparents and relatives proceed to take legal action, to pursue some kind of guardianship or other kind of more formal process to parent the children. But it's really up to the family to kind of decide that within their family structure.
Does that caseworker then continue on with the family once it's reunited, or does that all go away?
Right, so if the children go home or go back to live with their biological parents, then this kinship navigator program would end, because it's really intended to support the relatives or the kin. But they would make referrals to other services in the community that could then support the parents to take that going forward.
Well, Camus, thank you so much for taking time today to discuss this. It was new to me, so I learned a lot, and I enjoy that a lot. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us, and we look forward to working with more families.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today. Please tune in for more topics of interest to seniors, and remember, it's never too late to live and learn.